I'm Ashley Bennett, 23 from Minneapolis, and my whole life I've dreamed of studying international human rights law. When I got selected as a finalist for the prestigious Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford, it should have been the happiest moment of my life. But growing up with a sister like Megan, who always received preferential treatment from our parents, taught me to prepare for sabotage. Still, nothing could have prepared me for discovering my passport missing just days before my international interview. The betrayal cut deep, especially when my parents defended her, saying some opportunities weren't meant for everyone. If you've ever had your dreams sabotaged by someone close to you, give this video a like and let me know where you're watching from. Stick around to see how I turn this devastating betrayal into my greatest triumph. Growing up in our middle-class Minneapolis neighborhood, I always had my nose in a book while other kids played outside. My parents, Robert and Lisa Bennett, both worked in healthcare, Dad as a hospital administrator and Mom as a nurse. They provided a comfortable life, but from an early age, I knew I wanted more than our modest suburban existence. My passion for human rights began in sophomore year when Ms. Chambers, my world history teacher, showed us a documentary about international war crime tribunals. Something clicked inside me that day, and I joined the debate team, focusing on international humanitarian issues. I excelled academically without much effort, maintaining a 4.0 GPA throughout high school while participating in Model UN, student government, and volunteering at a legal aid clinic downtown. My sister Megan, just 2 years younger, couldn't have been more different. Where I was studious and serious, Megan was social and carefree. She struggled to maintain passing grades but excelled at making friends and charming adults. She was captain of the cheerleading squad, always surrounded by admirers, and somehow managed to sweet-talk her way out of every consequence. The pattern started early in our childhood. When I received an A on a difficult test, my parents would nod and say, "That's what we expect from you, Ashley." But when Megan barely passed, they'd throw a celebration dinner for her improvement. When I saved my allowance for months to buy a laptop for schoolwork, they saw it as expected responsibility. When Megan blew her money on clothes and came up short, they covered the difference, claiming she's still learning financial management. This uneven treatment became our family's unspoken dynamic. I learned to be self-sufficient, working at the campus library and as a research assistant throughout college while maintaining perfect grades. I lived at home to save money, commuting an hour each way to the University of Minnesota. Meanwhile, Megan got her own apartment near her community college, mostly funded by our parents, who claimed she needed independence to flourish. Despite these challenges, I remained focused on my goal, becoming an international human rights attorney. During my junior year, Professor Martinez, my international law professor and eventual mentor, suggested I apply for the Rhodes Scholarship. "With your grades, experience, and passion, you have a real shot," she told me after class one day. The Rhodes would cover everything: tuition, living expenses, travel, and research funds for graduate studies at Oxford University. For someone like me, working 3 campus jobs just to afford textbooks, this opportunity seemed like a fantasy. The application process was grueling: essays, recommendations, interviews with the university committee. I spent months preparing while juggling classes and work. When the email arrived announcing I was a national finalist, requiring an international interview at Oxford itself, I couldn't believe it. This was my ticket out, my chance at a prestigious career path that my family could never afford to support otherwise. I remember running to Professor Martinez's office, showing her the email with shaking hands. "I told you," she said, beaming with pride. "Now the real work begins." The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. I applied for an expedited passport, saved every penny for the plane ticket, and practiced interview questions with anyone willing to help. As the interview date approached, I couldn't help but notice Megan's attitude shifting. Her usual passive-aggressive comments about my boring academic life took on a sharper edge. "Oxford, huh? Guess you'll be too important for us normal people soon," she'd say at family dinners. Or, "Must be nice to have everything come so easily to you." Our parents never corrected these jabs, sometimes even nodding along. Despite the tension, I never imagined they would actively try to derail my future. I was naive enough to believe that despite our differences, family would ultimately support each other's dreams. I had no idea how wrong I was about to discover I'd been all along. The atmosphere at home grew increasingly strained as my interview date approached. What started as Megan's occasional sarcastic comments evolved into daily needling about my superiority complex and how I was abandoning the family for some fancy British school. Mom and Dad, instead of mediating, often chuckled at her remarks, as if they were harmless jokes rather than deliberate attempts to undermine my confidence. One Tuesday evening, about 2 weeks before my scheduled flight, I spread my application materials across the kitchen table to review my personal statement one last time. Megan strolled in, coffee mug in hand, and leaned over my shoulder. "Still obsessing over that scholarship thing?" she asked, her voice dripping with dismissal. Before I could respond, her hand slipped, sending hot coffee cascading over my carefully organized papers. "Oops," she said with mock concern while I frantically salvaged what I could. When I looked up at her, there wasn't even a pretense of remorse in her eyes. Instead, I caught something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. "Are you serious right now?" I demanded, blotting coffee from my personal statement copy. "It was an accident, Ashley," Mom interjected from the doorway. "Don't be so dramatic. Everything can be reprinted." That same night, during dinner, Dad asked about my Oxford plans. Before I could answer, Megan interrupted. "I don't get why you need some fancy foreign degree anyway. Plenty of good schools right here in Minnesota." Dad nodded thoughtfully, as if she'd made an insightful point. "Your sister has a point, Ashley. Seems like you're going through an awful lot of trouble when you could just stay local." I stared. At them, fork suspended midair. "This is the Rhodes Scholarship," I said slowly. "It's one of the most prestigious academic opportunities in the world. People work their entire academic careers hoping for this chance." Mom patted my hand condescendingly. "We know it's important to you, honey. We just worry you're setting yourself up for disappointment if it doesn't work out." Later that night, I heard voices as I passed Megan's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I couldn't help overhearing her talking to our parents. "She already thinks she's better than all of us," Megan was saying. "Can you imagine how unbearable she'll be if she actually gets this thing? We'll never hear the end of it." What shocked me most wasn't Megan's words, but my father's response. "I know, sweetheart. Sometimes Ashley doesn't realize that her ambitions affect the whole family. Not everyone gets to chase these kinds of dreams." I retreated to my room, heart pounding. The next day, I called my best friend Zoe, who'd been my confidant since freshman orientation. Unlike my family, Zoe had celebrated every step of my Rhodes journey. "They're being weird about Oxford," I confessed. "Especially Megan. She's making these accidents that keep threatening my application materials." Zoe's response was immediate and concerned. "Ashley, you need to lock up your important stuff. Your passport, your acceptance letter, everything." I laughed it off. "Come on, they wouldn't actually sabotage me. They're family." Zoe wasn't amused. "Family can be the most dangerous people when they're threatened, and your success threatens Megan's whole identity as the special one." I dismissed her concerns, but took some basic precautions anyway, moving my passport from my desk drawer to a locked box in my closet. Still, I couldn't shake the growing unease as my departure date approached. The weekend before my flight, I overheard Megan on the phone with a friend. "Yeah, Oxford interview this week," she was saying. "I know, right? So pretentious. But don't worry, I doubt anything will come of it." Her confident tone sent a chill through me. That night, I double-checked my locked box, confirming my passport was still there. 6 days until my flight. 5 days. 4. With each passing day, the tension in our house ratcheted up another notch. My parents began casually mentioning alternative careers that wouldn't require moving abroad. Megan's sabotage attempts grew bolder, unplugging my alarm clock before an important prep call, hiding my car keys when I had a meeting with Professor Martinez. I started sleeping with my locked box under my bed, but even then I never truly believed they would cross the final line. That was my mistake, underestimating just how far they would go to keep me in the place they had designated as mine in our family hierarchy. The betrayal happened 3 days before my scheduled flight to London. I woke early that morning to finalize my packing and review my interview materials one last time. Following my new routine, I reached under my bed for the locked box containing my passport, and other essential documents. The box was there, still locked, seemingly untampered with. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped instantly. My passport was gone. At first, I thought I was mistaken. I emptied the entire box, searching frantically through the remaining documents, credit cards, and birth certificate. I tore apart my room, checking every drawer, every pocket, every possible place where I might have misplaced it. But deep down, I already knew what had happened. After an hour of increasingly desperate searching, I confronted Megan in her bedroom. She was still in pajamas, scrolling through social media on her phone with a relaxed smile that vanished when she saw my face. "Where is it?" I demanded, not bothering with preliminaries. Megan's expression shifted instantly to wide-eyed innocence, a look I'd seen her perfect over years of evading consequences. "Where's what? What are you talking about, Ashley?" "My passport. It's missing from my locked box." I watched her face carefully, years of suspicion finally crystallizing into certainty. "How would I know anything about your passport?" she replied, voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Maybe you misplaced it. You have been pretty stressed lately." As she shifted position on her bed, I caught a glimpse of something blue peeking out from beneath her pillow. The edge of my passport, carelessly hidden in her haste. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, lunging forward to grab it. Megan was faster, snatching it and holding it behind her back. "Ashley, you need to calm down," she said, backing toward her door. "Mom, Dad, Ashley's freaking out." They appeared within seconds, as if they'd been waiting nearby. "What's going on?" Dad demanded, looking between us with a frown that suggested I was the problem. "She took my passport from my locked box," I said, pointing at Megan. "It's right. There, behind her back. I need it for my flight in 3 days." I expected shock, anger on my behalf, parental intervention to set things right. Instead, my father sighed heavily, exchanging a meaningful look with my mother. "Ashley, sit down," he said, gesturing to Megan's desk chair. "We need to talk about this Oxford situation." "What Oxford situation?" I remained standing, incredulous. "The interview I've been preparing for all year? The opportunity of a lifetime? That situation?" My mother perched on the edge of Megan's bed, putting an arm around my sister's shoulders. "Honey, we've been thinking it might be best if you focused on more realistic goals. Law school here in Minnesota, perhaps. There's no need to go all the way to England." I stared at them, unable to process what I was hearing. "You're not serious? You're actually supporting her stealing my passport? Do you understand that's a federal offense?" My father's face hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Ashley. No one's committing any crimes here. We're trying to help you see reason." "By stealing my passport? How is that helping me?" "Some opportunities," he said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "aren't meant for everyone. We're concerned that you're reaching beyond what's practical, beyond what's best for this family." The words hit me like physical blows. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity they had never believed in me. Worse, they actively wanted me to fail. "Give me my passport," I said, my voice unnaturally calm despite the hurricane raging inside me. Megan clutched it tighter, looking to our parents for support. "I think we should hold on to it for now," my mother said softly, "until you've had time to reconsider." I looked at each of their faces in turn, searching for any sign of shame or doubt. There was none. Only resolute determination to keep me exactly where I'd always been. The responsible, reliable daughter who would never outshine her sister or leave her parents behind. Without another word, I walked out of Megan's room, down the hall to my own, and closed the door quietly behind me. Only then did I allow the tears to come, muffling my sobs with a pillow as the full weight of their betrayal crashed down on me. For hours, I lay there, cycling through disbelief, rage, and despair. How could they do this? How could my own family sabotage something so important to me? As evening fell, I called Zoe, barely able to form coherent sentences through my tears. "They took my passport," I whispered. "My own parents are helping Megan keep me from going to the interview." Zoe's outrage was immediate and validating. "That's beyond messed up, Ashley. What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, the hopelessness threatening to drown me. Without a passport, I can't go, and there's no way to get a new one. In 3 days. There was a long silence on the line before Zoe spoke again. Maybe not, she said slowly. But what if you don't need a new one? I didn't understand what she meant, but her tone had shifted from anger to something else. Something that sounded almost like hope. What Zoe said next changed everything. Remember that conversation you had with Professor Martinez last semester about having contingency plans? The memory surfaced immediately. 3 months earlier, after a particularly tense weekend at home, where Megan had accidentally deleted a draft of my scholarship essay from our shared computer, I'd arrived at Professor Martinez's office hours visibly upset. She'd listened patiently as I vented about my family's subtle undermining of my academic pursuits. Family dynamics can be complicated, especially when one member is reaching for something extraordinary, she had said. But here's something I've learned in my career: always have a backup plan, for everything. At the time, her advice had seemed generally applicable to academic preparation. Now it took on new meaning. Ashley, Professor Martinez had continued, lowering her voice slightly, I don't want to overstep, but I've seen this pattern before with other students. If your family's behavior concerns you, perhaps we should take some practical precautions. She had then suggested I apply for a duplicate passport, explaining that it was perfectly legal to have 2 valid passports under certain circumstances. Better to have it and not need it, she'd said with a knowing look. Following her advice, I'd submitted the application for a duplicate, citing potential travel overlap for academic purposes. When it arrived, Professor Martinez had offered to keep it secured in her office safe. Just in case, she'd said. I'd almost forgotten about that second passport, tucked away in her office. It had seemed like an excessive precaution at the time. Now it looked like salvation. I need to call Professor Martinez, I told Zoe, hope flickering to life, right now. Despite the late hour, Professor Martinez answered on the 3rd ring. I quickly explained the situation, my words tumbling out in an anxious rush. I was afraid something like this might happen, she said, her voice calm but sad. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 8:00? I'll be there early to prepare for my lecture. I'll be there, I promised, already mentally planning my escape. That night, I lay awake, listening to the occasional murmurs from my parents' room down the hall. They were discussing me, I was certain. Planning how to handle my inevitable continued resistance. Little did they know I was done fighting them on their terms. The next morning, I left the house at 7:30, telling my mother I was going to the library to think things over. The skeptical look she gave me suggested she didn't entirely believe me, but she didn't try to stop me either. Professor Martinez was waiting in her office, a travel mug of coffee in hand and concern etched into her face. Ashley, she said, giving me a brief but fierce hug. I'm so sorry about your family's behavior. It's inexcusable. From her desk drawer, she retrieved my backup passport. I suppose this is why we planned ahead, she said, handing me the small blue booklet that represented my freedom. Holding. It felt surreal, a tangible symbol of escape from the trap my family had set. I can't go back home, I realized aloud. Not until after the interview. They'll just take this one too. Professor Martinez nodded, already ahead of me. I've spoken to a former student who has a furnished guest room. She's happy to have you stay until your flight. No charge. Tears welled in my eyes at this unexpected kindness. I can't thank you enough. Don't thank me, she replied firmly. Just go to that interview and show them the brilliant mind I've had the privilege of teaching. We quickly outlined a plan. I would go back home while my family was out that afternoon, pack only what I absolutely needed, and leave a note explaining that I knew what they had done and that I would be proceeding with the interview regardless. Professor Martinez arranged for her former student, Julia, to pick me up a block from my house to avoid any potential confrontation. That afternoon, I executed the plan flawlessly. My parents were at work, and Megan was at her standing Wednesday hair appointment. I packed efficiently, interview outfit, casual clothes, toiletries, laptop, and documents. Before leaving, I wrote a brief note. I know what you did, and I know why. I'm disappointed, but not surprised. I will be attending my interview as planned. Please don't try to contact me until I return. I placed it on the kitchen counter where it would be immediately visible. As I locked the front door behind me for what might be the last time, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness at the broken trust, anger at their betrayal, but most predominantly, a surprising sense of liberation. Julia, a corporate attorney who had been Professor Martinez's student 5 years earlier, greeted me warmly and drove me to her stylish apartment in downtown Minneapolis. Professor M changed my life too, she told me as she showed me to the guest room. Anything you need, just ask. Over the next 2 days, I focused entirely on interview preparation. Professor Martinez arranged mock interviews with other faculty members, providing invaluable feedback on my responses. The hardest question to practice for was about family support. They'll likely ask about your support system, Professor Martinez warned. Standard for Rhodes candidates. We crafted a response that was technically truthful, but omitted the recent betrayal. I've been fortunate to have strong academic mentorship throughout my education, I would say, before pivoting to discuss the supportive university environment. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from my family, escalating in urgency as they realized I was serious about proceeding with the interview. Megan's messages started with angry accusations. Way to cause drama as usual. Then came my mother's concerned texts. Ashley, please come home so we can discuss this rationally. Finally, my father's thinly veiled threats. If you go through with this foolishness, don't expect us to continue supporting you financially. That last message almost broke my resolve. My part-time campus jobs barely covered my personal expenses. Without my parents' contribution to tuition, how would I complete my final semester? But Julia, overhearing my moment of doubt, offered perspective. If you get the Rhodes, none of that matters. If you don't, there are other options. Loans, scholarships, even legal action for the passport theft if necessary. But right now, focus on the opportunity in front of you. She was right, one problem at a time. First, the interview. Everything else could wait. The night before my rescheduled flight, I barely slept, my mind racing with interview questions, family betrayals, and the enormous stakes of the coming days. Despite everything, a part of me still couldn't believe this was happening, that my own family had tried to sabotage my future, and that I was defying them so completely. In the darkness of Julia's guest room, I made myself a promise. Whatever happened with the scholarship, I would never again allow anyone, family or otherwise, to limit my potential. The morning of my flight brought new complications. A text from Zoe. Your parents came by my apartment looking for you. Said they're worried sick. I didn't tell them anything, but heads up, they're searching. This new development sent a wave of anxiety through me. Would they think to check the airport? I couldn't risk running into them at the terminal. After a quick consultation with Julia, we developed a new strategy. She would drive me to St. Paul International instead of Minneapolis, a smaller airport with connecting flights to Chicago, where I could then catch my transatlantic flight to London. The route was less direct and more expensive, depleting almost all of my savings, but it minimized the chance of a confrontation. As we drove to the airport, another message appeared, this time from my father. Ashley, this has gone far enough. Your mother is beside herself with worry. If financial concerns are driving this rebellion, we can discuss increasing your allowance. The manipulation was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. They still didn't understand or refuse to acknowledge that this wasn't about money. It was about opportunity, growth, and most fundamentally, respect for my autonomy. I didn't respond to any messages, focusing instead on reviewing my interview materials during the drive. Julia walked me all the way to security, giving me a fierce hug before I entered the line. You've got this, she said. Whatever happens, you've already won by not letting them stop you. The journey to Oxford passed in a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. Every announcement over airport speakers made me jump, half expecting to hear my name called, to see my parents appear to drag me home. The relief I felt when the plane finally lifted off from American soil was indescribable. Only then did I allow myself to cry, silent tears streaming down my face as I stared out the window at the receding lights of Chicago. The passenger next to me, an elderly woman with kind eyes, quietly passed me a tissue without comment. The emotional toll of the past few days hit me fully during that flight. Between fitful attempts at sleep, I found myself cycling through feelings of betrayal, doubt, and determination. Had I overreacted? Was I destroying my relationship with my family for a chance at a scholarship I might not even receive? The questions tormented me, but underneath them ran a current of certainty. What they had done was wrong. Stealing my passport was not an act of love or protection. It was control, pure and simple. The fact that they couldn't see that, or wouldn't admit it, only confirmed I was making the right choice. I arrived in London exhausted but functioning on adrenaline. The tube ride to Paddington Station, then the train to Oxford, felt surreal. The English countryside flashing past the window might as well have been another planet compared to the suburban Minneapolis neighborhood I'd left behind. Oxford itself was both exactly as I'd imagined and completely different. The ancient stone buildings emanated history and prestige, making me feel simultaneously awed and inadequate. My budget hotel room was small but clean, within walking distance of the interview location. After a quick shower, I forced myself to review my preparation materials one more time before collapsing into bed, setting 3 separate alarms to ensure I wouldn't oversleep. That night, the dreams came. Nightmares where I arrived at the interview to find my family waiting, where my passport disappeared again, where Professor Martinez revealed she had been working with them all along. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, checking that my passport was still under my pillow. The morning brought no messages from home, an ominous silence that suggested they were either respecting my space or planning something else. Either way, I couldn't afford to worry about it now. I dressed carefully in the interview outfit I'd packed, a navy blue suit that had consumed 3 paychecks but projected exactly the professional image I wanted. As I applied minimal makeup, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked older somehow, her eyes holding a new wariness. I arrived at the interview location 30 minutes early, joining a small group of equally nervous candidates in an ornate waiting room. Everyone else seemed to be chatting comfortably, exchanging stories about their universities and accomplishments. I sat slightly apart, unable to engage in small talk while my mind raced with all that had happened. First time in Oxford? A friendly voice broke through my thoughts. A young woman with a British accent and a warm smile had taken the seat beside me. Is it that obvious? I attempted a smile in return. American accent. Plus you look like I feel every time I interview somewhere new. Terrified but trying not to show it. Her candor surprised a genuine laugh out of me, the first in what felt like weeks. I'm Charlotte, she continued. Developmental economics at Cambridge, but please don't hold that against me. Ashley, international law at Minnesota. We chatted easily for the next few minutes, her friendly manner helping to settle my nerves. When my name was called, Charlotte gave me a thumbs up. You'll smash it, she whispered as I stood. The interview room contained a panel of 5 distinguished academics, seated at a long table with my application materials before them. They introduced themselves with formal politeness, then began with standard questions about my academic interests and career goals. I answered automatically, falling into the practiced responses I'd rehearsed countless times with Professor Martinez. Then came the question I'd been dreading. Family is an important support system for Rhodes Scholars, given the pressures of the program. How have your loved ones responded to your application? For a moment, I froze, the practiced answer vanishing from my mind. In its place came an impulse toward honesty that I couldn't suppress. My academic mentors have been incredibly supportive, I began, sticking to the script. Then, deviating, my family situation is complex. My parents and sister have their own vision for my future that differs from mine. Their response to this opportunity has been challenging, but navigating that challenge has only strengthened my resolve and independence. A flicker of interest passed between the panel members. The woman at the center leaned forward slightly. Could you elaborate on how you've navigated those challenges? This was dangerous territory, but something told me that authenticity mattered more than perfection in this moment. When obstacles appeared, I said carefully, I found resources and support outside my immediate family. I learned to create backup, plans for every contingency. I paused, then added, most importantly, I learned that other people's limitations shouldn't define my aspirations. The panel's reaction was unreadable, but the atmosphere in the room seemed to shift. The questioning moved on to my research interests and past academic work, but with a new energy, as if they were seeing me more clearly now. As the interview concluded, the center panelist said something unexpected. Ms. Bennett, resilience isn't listed as an official selection criterion for the Rhodes, but perhaps it should be. Thank you for your candor. Walking out of that room, I felt a curious lightness. Regardless of the outcome, I had represented myself honestly. For the first time in days, I checked my phone, finding dozens of missed calls and messages from my family. I silenced it again without reading any of them. Their drama could wait until I was back on American soil. Whatever happened next, I had done what I came to do. No one, not even my own family, had been able to stop me. My return flight to the United States was scheduled for 2 days after the interview, giving me a brief window to explore Oxford before heading home to face whatever awaited me there. I spent those days wandering the ancient university town, imagining what it would be like to study in those hallowed halls, to become part of the institution's centuries-long tradition of scholarship. The beauty of the place was almost painful given how uncertain my chances of returning were. The Rhodes was fiercely competitive, with thousands of qualified applicants vying for a handful of positions. My interview had gone well, I thought. But was it enough? On my final evening in Oxford, I found myself sitting on a bench by the River Cherwell, watching punters glide past in the golden late afternoon light. For the first time since discovering my missing passport, I allowed myself to fully process what had happened with my family. The betrayal still stung sharply, but the distance, both physical and emotional, provided a new perspective. Their actions, while inexcusable, suddenly seemed pathetic rather than powerful. They had been so threatened by my potential success that they'd resorted to literal theft to prevent it. What kind of insecurity drove such behavior? I thought about Megan, my sister who had always been the family favorite, always received the benefit of the doubt. Had she ever truly been happy? Or was her entire identity built around being the special one, the daughter who needed extra help and attention? If my success so threatened that identity that she felt compelled to sabotage me, perhaps her position wasn't as enviable as I'd always believed. As for my parents, their behavior revealed a disturbing smallness of vision. They had actively tried to clip my wings rather than celebrate my chance to soar. What fear drove that choice? Fear of change? Of being left behind? Or simply the fear of having their own limited horizons exposed by my broader ones? These reflections didn't excuse what they'd done, but they helped me understand it. And understanding, I realized, was the first step toward deciding what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with them moving forward. The flight back to the United States gave me time to prepare for the confrontation that surely awaited. I decided to stay with Zoe rather than returning home, at least initially. She'd already cleared it with her roommate and made up the couch. For me. Landing in Minneapolis, I felt a strange sense of disconnection. The familiar skyline, the accents around me, even the smell of the airport, all seemed slightly foreign after just a few days away. Or perhaps I was the one who had changed, returning different from the person who had left. Zoe was waiting at arrivals, her familiar face breaking into a wide smile when she spotted me. "International Woman of Mystery returns," she called, pulling me into a tight hug. "I want to hear everything, but not here. My car's in the short-term lot." As we drove to her apartment, I filled her in on Oxford, the interview, and my reflections by the river. "So what's the plan with your family?" she asked as we neared her building. "They've been blowing up my phone too, you know. Your mom even came by the coffee shop where I work." I sighed, unsurprised. "I'll call them tomorrow, let them know I'm back safely but staying with you for now. After that, I honestly don't know, Zoe. How do you move forward with people who were willing to sabotage your future?" Zoe didn't have an answer, and I didn't expect one. Some questions you have to answer for yourself. The next morning, I called my mother from Zoe's phone, knowing she wouldn't recognize the number. She answered on the second ring, her voice tense. "Hello? Mom, it's me. I'm back in Minneapolis." The relief in her voice sounded genuine. "Ashley? Thank God, we've been so worried. Where are you? Are you coming home?" "I'm staying with Zoe for now. I just wanted you to know I'm safe." A pause, then. "Ashley, I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this as a family. What you did was very impulsive and concerning." The audacity of her attempting to flip the narrative made me laugh out loud. "What I did? Mom, you and Dad supported Megan stealing my passport. A federal offense, by the way. You actively tried to prevent me from attending an interview that could shape my entire future. And you're concerned about my behavior?" "We were trying to protect you from disappointment," she replied, her voice hardening, "and from developing unrealistic expectations about your future. Not everyone gets to go to Oxford, Ashley." "That's exactly right, Mom. Not everyone does. Only those who earn it through hard work and merit. I deserved the chance to try, regardless of whether I ultimately received the scholarship." Another pause, longer this time. "Your father wants to speak with you." Before I could object, his voice came on the line. "Ashley, this has gone on long enough. You've made your point. It's time to come home and discuss this rationally." "I am being rational," I replied calmly. "I'm making decisions based on what's best for my future and my well-being. Right now, that doesn't include coming home." "And what about your tuition for next semester?" he asked, the implied threat clear. "If you insist on this childish behavior, we may need to reconsider our financial support." I had anticipated this move. "I've already spoken with the financial aid office. If necessary, I can take out loans for my final semester. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I'm prepared if it does." The silence that followed told me I'd caught him off guard. He had expected the threat of financial consequences to bring me to heel immediately. "We just want what's best for you," he finally said, his voice softer but no more convincing. "No, Dad. You want what's most comfortable for you. There's a difference." After ending the call, I felt simultaneously drained and strengthened. Setting boundaries with my family for the first time was exhausting but necessary. The next week passed, in a strange limbo. I returned to my campus jobs and final semester classes while staying on Zoe's couch. My family alternated between angry messages, guilt-inducing pleas, and periods of pointed silence. I responded minimally, maintaining the boundaries I'd established, while processing my own complicated emotions about their betrayal. Then, exactly 9 days after my return from Oxford, an email arrived that would change everything. The email arrived while I was working my shift at the campus library, from the Rhodes Trust, with the subject line, "Following your recent interview." My hands trembled so badly I had to ask a coworker to cover the desk while I stepped outside to read it. Taking a deep breath, I opened the message, expecting either acceptance or rejection. Instead, I found something unexpected. "Dear Ms. Bennett, the interview committee was impressed by your academic credentials and personal qualities displayed during your recent interview. Before making final decisions, we would like to schedule a follow-up video interview with you and a member of our selection committee who was unable to attend your in-person session. Please indicate your availability for the coming week." I stared at the screen, unsure what this meant. Was this standard procedure a good sign, a bad one? I immediately forwarded the email to Professor Martinez, who responded within minutes. "This is unusual but very promising. They don't request additional interviews unless they're seriously considering a candidate." With renewed hope, I scheduled the video interview for Friday afternoon, booking one of the library's private study rooms for the occasion. When Friday arrived, I dressed formally again, setting up in the study room 15 minutes early to test the connection. At precisely the appointed time, 2 faces appeared on my screen. One I recognized from my Oxford interview, and another, an elegant woman with silver-streaked hair, who introduced herself as Dr. Eleanor Harrington, Selection Committee Chair. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for making yourself available," Dr. Harrington began. "I apologize for missing your in-person interview due to a last-minute scheduling conflict. My colleagues were quite impressed, particularly by your candor regarding personal challenges. The interview proceeded professionally, with questions about my research interests and academic goals similar to those I'd answered in Oxford. Then, near the end, Dr. Harrington shifted to a more personal line of inquiry. Ms. Bennett, during your Oxford interview, you mentioned navigating family challenges in pursuit of this opportunity. Without asking you to divulge anything uncomfortable, I'm curious how that experience has shaped your perspective on perseverance and resilience. I considered my answer carefully. It taught me that obstacles can come from unexpected sources, including those we expect to support us. More importantly, it showed me that with the right mentorship and personal determination, those obstacles need not be defining. They can instead become part of the story of how we achieved our goals despite challenges. Dr. Harrington nodded, thoughtfully. One final question. Are you familiar with the BBC's documentary series Paths to Excellence? The apparent non sequitur caught me off guard. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with it. It's a relatively new series exploring the journeys of academic high achievers, particularly those who've overcome significant obstacles. The reason I ask is that I consult for the series occasionally, and your story, from what I've gathered, might be of interest to them. Would you be open to a separate conversation about potentially participating, regardless of the scholarship outcome? This unexpected turn left me momentarily speechless. A documentary about my experience? I would certainly be interested in learning more, I managed to reply. Excellent. I'll have their producer contact you directly. And Ms. Bennett, thank you for your time today. The committee will be in touch regarding the scholarship decision within 2 weeks. After the call ended, I sat in the study room, trying to process this new development. Whether or not I received the Rhodes, my story had resonated enough with Dr. Harrington to suggest me for a documentary. There was a certain validation in that which felt healing after my family's dismissal of my ambitions. True to her word, Dr. Harrington connected me with Sophia Chen, a producer for the BBC documentary series, who reached out the very next day. Our initial call was meant to be exploratory, but Sophia's enthusiasm was immediate. Your journey embodies exactly what our series aims to highlight, she explained. Academic excellence despite personal obstacles, the importance of mentorship, the courage to pursue opportunity even when it means difficult choices. We scheduled a preliminary filming session for the following week, with the understanding that more extensive filming would follow if I received the scholarship. I was both excited and nervous about sharing my story so publicly. Would it further damage my relationship with my family? Or might it help them understand the magnitude of what they'd done? As the days passed, my family's attempts to contact me grew less frequent. Perhaps they were finally accepting my boundaries, or maybe they were simply regrouping, planning their next approach. Either way, the respite gave me space to focus on classes, the potential documentary, and the agonizing wait for the Rhodes decision. The preliminary filming with Sophia was a surprisingly cathartic experience. Talking through my journey on camera, from my earliest academic aspirations to the passport theft and its aftermath, helped me process the events in a new way. Sophia was a skilled interviewer, asking questions that helped me articulate feelings I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. What we're capturing here is not just an academic journey, she told me during a break. It's a coming-of-age story about defining yourself on your own terms. Her words resonated deeply. Whatever happened with the Rhodes, I was no longer the person who had left Minneapolis 2 weeks ago, desperate and betrayed. I was someone who had faced sabotage and still found a way forward. Someone who had learned to create her own opportunities rather than depend on others' approval or support. 10 days after the video interview, another email arrived from the Rhodes Trust. This time, I was sitting in Zoe's apartment, working on a paper for my International Human Rights Law seminar. Seeing the sender, I froze, my cursor hovering over the notification. Open it, Zoe urged from across the room. Whatever it says, we'll deal with it together. With a deep breath, I clicked on the email and began to read. Dear Ms. Bennett, it is our great pleasure to inform you that you have been selected as a Rhodes Scholar. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had to read the sentence 3 times before it fully registered. I'd done it. Despite everything, despite my family's active sabotage, despite having to navigate the entire process virtually alone, I had actually done it. Zoe's excited shriek told me she was reading over my shoulder. Ashley, oh my God, you did it! She threw her arms around me as I sat there, still in shock. The rest of the email contained logistical information, congratulations, and details about the next steps, but I could barely focus on them through the haze of emotion. This scholarship didn't just mean Oxford. It meant freedom, validation, and a future determined by my own abilities rather than my family's limitations. Within an hour of receiving the news, I had calls from Professor Martinez, Sophia Chen, and Dr. Harrington, all offering their congratulations. Sophia was particularly excited. This changes everything for the documentary, she explained. We want to fast-track it now, make it a feature in our upcoming season. How quickly can we schedule more filming? Events moved at dizzying speed after that. Within days, I was signing release forms, filming additional interviews, and discussing the documentary's narrative arc with Sophia and her team. The working title, Beyond Limitations, A Rhodes Scholar's Journey, both thrilled and terrified me. My story would be public, my family's actions exposed, albeit with careful editing, to focus on resilience rather than vilification. 3 weeks into production, Sophia's team created a 2-minute trailer to promote the upcoming documentary. It featured clips from my interviews interspersed with footage of Oxford and the Rhodes House. In one key segment, I briefly described discovering my missing passport and realizing my family had betrayed me. The trailer concluded with a shot of me walking confidently across the Oxford campus, my voice overlay stating, "Sometimes the people closest to you can't see your potential because it challenges their perspective." My journey taught me that true support might come from unexpected places, and that with enough determination, even deliberate sabotage can't stop you from achieving your dreams. The trailer was released on the BBC's social media platforms on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, it had reached my family. The first indication came in the form of a text from Megan. "Is this some kind of sick joke? You're dragging our family through the mud on international television?" Then came my father's voicemail, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Ashley, call me immediately. This publicity stunt has gone far enough." My mother opted for an email, her words dripping with martyred distress. "How could you do this to us? After everything we've sacrificed for you?" I didn't respond to any of them immediately, discussing the situation with Sophia first. "This was always a possibility," she acknowledged. "How do you want to handle it?" "We can provide security if you're concerned about a confrontation." I appreciated her concern but didn't think it would come to that. "They're more likely to want to control the narrative than create a scene," I explained. "But I should probably talk to them, set the record straight once and for all." We agreed that any such conversation would not be filmed, respecting the privacy of what would surely be a difficult exchange. 2 days later, my prediction proved accurate when my parents and Megan appeared at Zoe's apartment building. Zoe texted me from work. "Heads up, your family is here asking for you. I didn't let them in, but they're waiting in the lobby." I steeled myself for the confrontation, taking a moment to center my thoughts before heading downstairs. They were standing awkwardly in the lobby, my mother pacing nervously, my father consulting his phone, and Megan sitting sullenly on a bench by the door. When they saw me, 3 pairs of eyes locked onto mine with expressions ranging from anger to apprehension. "Perhaps we should find somewhere more private to talk," I suggested, gesturing to a small seating area in the corner of the lobby. Once seated, my father immediately took control, his voice low but intense. "This has gone beyond a family disagreement, Ashley. You're publicly smearing us, making accusations that could have serious consequences for all of us." I maintained my composure, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm telling my story. A story about perseverance despite obstacles. If you're uncomfortable with your role in that story, perhaps you should have considered that before stealing my passport." "We never stole anything," my mother interjected, her voice quavering. "We were concerned about you traveling alone internationally. We were trying to protect you. The blatant rewriting of history might have worked in the past, but I was beyond manipulation now. Mom, please, we both know that's not true. You weren't concerned about my safety. You were concerned about me succeeding at something that threatened the family dynamic." Megan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. You always have to be the center of attention, don't you? The perfect daughter with the perfect grades and the perfect future. Now you're playing the victim on international television. It's pathetic. Something in her tone caught my attention. Beneath the anger, there was a note of something else. Pain, perhaps, or fear. This isn't about attention, Megan. It's about not letting anyone, even family, limit my potential. And I'm not portraying myself as a victim. I'm showing how I overcame obstacles, including the ones you deliberately placed in my path. My father shifted strategies, his voice softening to the reasonable tone he used when trying to close a difficult negotiation. Ashley, we understand you're upset. We may have handled things poorly, but surely we can resolve this privately as a family without public exposure. This documentary could damage all our reputations, your sister's career prospects, our standing in the community. I shook my head, cutting him off. I'm not responsible for protecting you from the consequences of your actions. I'm not naming names in the documentary. I'm not out to destroy anyone, but I won't pretend the sabotage didn't happen to make you comfortable. A heavy silence fell over our group. My mother was fighting back tears, my father looked defeated, and Megan stared at the floor. Finally, unexpectedly, Megan spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I was jealous. The admission hung in the air, stunning in its honesty. You've always been the smart one, the capable one. Everyone always said, why can't you be more like Ashley? Teachers, relatives, even mom and dad, though they'd never admit it. She looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. When you got selected for that interview, I couldn't stand the thought of you succeeding at something else. Something so huge. It felt like you'd be gone forever. And I'd be stuck here. Always the disappointing daughter. The raw vulnerability in her confession caught me off guard. For the first time, I glimpsed the insecurity behind the sabotage. Not that it excused her actions, but it made them comprehensible in a way they hadn't been before. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unsettled by Megan's uncharacteristic candor. We never meant to hurt you, Ashley, my mother finally said. We just thought, maybe it would be better if things didn't change too much. The admission was telling in its inadequacy. They hadn't considered what was best for me at all, only what was most comfortable for them. After all these years, I finally saw my family clearly. Not malicious, perhaps, but deeply insecure and limited by their own fears. I'm going to Oxford, I said firmly. The documentary will air. Those things are non-negotiable. What happens between us now, whether we have any relationship moving forward, depends entirely on your ability to acknowledge what you did and take responsibility for it. My father began to protest, but my mother placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. We need time to process all this, she said quietly. I nodded, standing to signal the end of our conversation. Take all the time you need. I'll be leaving for Oxford in August. As they filed out of the lobby, Megan lingered briefly. For what? It's worth, she said quietly. I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for doing it at all. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough, but it was perhaps a beginning. Watching them walk away, I felt a curious lightness. The confrontation I had, dreaded, was over, and I had emerged with my boundaries intact. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, not theirs. 1 year later, I stood on the ancient stone bridge spanning the River Cherwell, watching punters glide by below, just as I had during my interview visit. Now, however, Oxford wasn't a distant dream, but my home. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and old books, a combination I'd come to associate with my new life. My first year as a Rhodes Scholar had transformed me in ways I couldn't have imagined when I arrived, nervous and alone, the previous August. Oxford itself was everything I'd hoped for academically and more. The rigorous coursework challenged me daily, pushing the boundaries of my understanding and analysis. My thesis on international legal frameworks for protecting vulnerable populations in conflict zones was progressing well, with my advisor suggesting it had potential for publication. But the most profound changes weren't academic at all. They were personal, shaped by the community I'd found and the distance, both physical and emotional, from my family's limiting expectations. Within weeks of arrival, I'd formed close friendships with a diverse group of fellow scholars. Charlotte, whom I'd met briefly during my interview, became my closest friend. A brilliant economist with a wicked sense of humor, she helped me navigate both Oxford's academic traditions and British culture. Then there was Mirai from Japan, studying theoretical physics, Kwame from Ghana, focusing on sustainable agriculture, and Elena from Italy, whose work in bioethics often intersected with my human rights focus. Together, we formed a tight-knit circle that supported each other through academic challenges and personal growth. They became my chosen family, accepting me fully while encouraging my ambitions, rather than feeling threatened by them. Professionally, opportunities emerged that I couldn't have anticipated. The BBC documentary, Beyond Limitations, aired 2 months after I arrived at Oxford, receiving critical acclaim and unexpected attention. My inbox filled with messages from young people facing similar family obstacles, thanking me for showing that success remained possible, despite lack of support from those who should have been most encouraging. The documentary led to speaking, invitations at conferences and universities, where I shared my perspective on resilience and self-advocacy in academic pursuits. Each speaking engagement helped me reclaim my narrative, transforming painful experiences into insights that might help others. As my professional profile grew, so did my confidence in setting boundaries with my family back home. The healing process wasn't linear or simple. Working with Dr. Rebecca Winters, a therapist specializing in family trauma, helped me untangle the complex emotions surrounding my parents' and sister's betrayal. What they did reflects their limitations, not yours, she reminded me during one particularly difficult session following a boundary-pushing email from my mother. You can acknowledge their humanity without accepting their behavior. The documentary's release had forced a reckoning within my family that might otherwise have taken years. My father initially retreated into angry silence, refusing to watch the film or discuss it. My mother vacillated between defensive justification and tearful apologies that somehow always centered her pain rather than my experience. But Megan surprised me. 6 months after I left for Oxford, she sent an email that showed genuine introspection. I've been seeing a therapist about why I did what I did. I've realized I've spent my whole life defining myself in opposition to you instead of figuring out who I actually am. I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I don't think I've earned it. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand why I hurt you and make sure I never do anything like that again. That email marked the beginning of a cautious reconnection. Our communication started small, occasional texts about neutral topics, brief video calls where we carefully avoided triggering subjects. Gradually, as Megan demonstrated consistent respect for my boundaries, our conversations deepened. During my spring break, we scheduled a video call where she shared that she'd transferred to a 4-year university, pursuing a degree in social work, a field she'd discovered genuine passion for. I think I'm finally doing something because I want to, not because of how it compares to you, she admitted. It feels different, better. My parents' evolution was slower and less complete. They made overtures, sending care packages and asking about my studies, but still struggled to fully acknowledge the harm they'd caused. When I returned to Minneapolis briefly during summer break, our reunion was civil but strained. They seemed genuinely proud of my accomplishments but uncomfortable with my newfound independence. We just didn't want to lose you to another country, another life, my mother confessed during a tense lunch. We were selfish, my father acknowledged, the admission clearly difficult for him. We thought we were protecting the family, but we were really just protecting ourselves from change. It wasn't the full accountability I'd hoped for, but it was more honesty than they'd ever offered before. I accepted it as a step in an ongoing process, maintaining the emotional distance I needed to protect myself while leaving the door open for future healing. Now standing on the bridge in my second autumn at Oxford, I reflected on how far I'd come from that desperate moment of discovering my missing passport. The pain of that betrayal would always be part of my story, but it no longer defined me. Instead, it had become the catalyst for a profound personal transformation. I had learned to trust my instincts, to create safety nets when bridges might be burned, to recognize when people were reacting to their own insecurities rather than my actions. Most importantly, I had learned that family could be chosen as well, as given that support might come from unexpected sources and that other people's limitations need not become my own. As I watched a new group of students punt awkwardly beneath the bridge, laughing as they navigated the unfamiliar craft, I smiled at the metaphor. Life rarely moved in a straight line. There were currents and obstacles, moments of being stuck, and moments of unexpected progress. The key was keeping sight of your destination while remaining flexible about the route. My phone vibrated with a message from Charlotte, reminding me about our study group meeting in 20 minutes. As I turned to head back to college, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for this life I had fought so hard to claim. The path hadn't been straight or easy, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the knowledge that I was stronger than any obstacle, more resourceful than any sabotage, and worthy of every opportunity I earned. Have you ever had someone close to you try to hold you back from achieving your dreams? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories about overcoming obstacles and share with anyone who might need a reminder that other people's limitations don't define your potential. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the most powerful backup plan is believing in yourself, even when others don't.
I'm Jessica Wright, 28, and I once believed I had it all: a thriving marketing career, a gorgeous fiancé named Ryan, and a dream wedding on the horizon. What I didn't have was a sister I could trust. Amanda had always competed with me, but I never imagined she'd steal my entire life while I was away on business. When I walked into what should have been MY reception and found her wearing MY dress beside MY fiancé, she smirked and said those unforgivable words. Little did they know, I had a secret that would change everything. Before I dive into how my perfect life imploded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. The justice in this story might just heal your heart too. Ryan Bennett walked into my life 3 years ago at a charity gala in downtown Boston. I was working the event for my marketing firm, ensuring everything ran smoothly for our client. He was there representing his investment firm, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit. Our eyes locked across the room in that cliché way you see in movies, but never believe happens in real life. Yet it did. "You look like you could use this," he said, handing me a glass of champagne after watching me manage a minor crisis with the auction items. "Is it that obvious I'm stressed?" I laughed, accepting the drink gratefully. "No, you're handling everything perfectly. I'm just observant." His smile was warm, confident without being cocky. We talked for hours that night, long after my professional obligations ended. Ryan was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. By the end of the evening, we'd exchanged numbers, and he called the very next day. Our relationship progressed quickly but never felt rushed. Within 6 months, we were practically living together, and at the 1-year mark, we made it official, finding a beautiful apartment in Back Bay with a view of the Charles River. Every morning, we'd have coffee on our small balcony, planning our future together. Ryan worked at his investment firm, climbing the corporate ladder impressively fast, while I continued developing marketing campaigns for luxury brands. On our 2nd anniversary, Ryan took me to the lighthouse where we'd had our first official date. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, he dropped to one knee and presented a platinum ring with an emerald-cut diamond. "Jessica Wright, you've made these past 2 years the best of my life. You challenge me, support me, and make me laugh every single day. I can't imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me?" I said yes through happy tears, and we spent the evening calling family and close friends to share our joy. My parents, Barbara and George, were thrilled. Dad had always liked Ryan, especially their shared interest in golf and classic cars. Mom immediately started talking about venue options and dress shopping. Then there was Amanda, my younger sister by 2 years. Her congratulations seemed genuine enough on the phone, but I noticed the slight edge in her voice. That was nothing new. Since childhood, Amanda had lived in the shadow of my achievements, or at least that's how she saw it. When I made honor roll, she pushed herself to make high honors. When I was accepted to Boston University, she applied to Harvard, though ended up at Boston College. When I started dating someone, she'd suddenly find interest in them or try to introduce me to someone better. I hoped my engagement might finally put our rivalry to rest. After all, Amanda was 26 now, surely too mature to compete over something as personal as marriage. But within weeks, she'd started dating a surgeon, sending our mother elaborate texts about their expensive dates and potential future together. Despite this undercurrent of tension, wedding planning began in earnest. Ryan and I secured a stunning waterfront venue for June of the following year, giving us plenty of time to plan. I found my dream dress, an elegant A-line gown with delicate lace detailing and a sweetheart neckline that made me feel like royalty. We sent save the dates, selected our wedding party, with Amanda as a bridesmaid, trying to keep the peace, and started dance lessons for our first dance. 8 months before the wedding, my boss called me into her office with an unexpected opportunity. "We need someone to handle the Kingsley account launch in London," she explained. "It's a 2-week assignment, but it could lead to heading up our new international division." "You're my first choice, Jessica." I was flattered, but hesitant. "When would this be?" "Next month." "I know it's not ideal with your wedding planning, but this could be career-defining." When I told Ryan that evening, I expected some disappointment, but instead, he was enthusiastically supportive. "You have to take this, Jess. The wedding planning will wait. This is huge for your career." He wrapped me in a warm embrace. "I'm so proud of you." His support solidified what I already knew. I was marrying the right man. We agreed that he'd handle any urgent wedding matters while I was gone, and my maid of honor, Megan, offered to step in if needed. What I never imagined was that my absence would create the perfect opportunity for the ultimate betrayal, one that would shatter the beautiful life we'd built together. London greeted me with typical English weather, gray skies and a persistent drizzle that seemed to match the growing unease I felt being so far from home. The Kingsley account was even more demanding than anticipated. As a luxury lifestyle brand entering the European market, they needed a complete marketing strategy developed in record time. My days quickly filled with meetings, market research, and creative sessions that often stretched well into the evening. During my first few days abroad, Ryan and I maintained our connection through regular video calls. He'd show me mail that had arrived, ask questions about wedding decisions, and tell me how much he missed me. Each call ended with "I love you" and counting down the days until my return. "How's everything at home?" I asked during our 5th day's call, noticing he seemed slightly distracted. "All good. Just busy at work," Ryan replied, his eyes darting away from the screen momentarily. "Oh, Amanda stopped by to drop off some wedding magazines your mom sent. She offered to help with some of the planning while you're away." I felt a twinge of discomfort. "That's nice of her. But she doesn't need to do that. We've got most things under control, and Megan can help with anything urgent. It's no problem. She's your sister and wants to be involved." His tone was casual, but something felt off. Over the next few days, our calls became shorter and less frequent. Ryan cited work stress and time zone differences as reasons, which made sense logically, but my intuition whispered warnings I couldn't quite articulate. Then I noticed something on social media that intensified my unease. Amanda had posted a photo of my living room with the caption, "Wedding planning session. Can't wait for the big day." The picture showed scattered brochures and what appeared to be my wedding planning binder on the coffee table. What struck me as odd wasn't just Amanda being in our apartment without me, it was that Ryan was clearly there too. His laptop and distinctive coffee mug were visible in the corner of the shot. I texted Ryan immediately, saw Amanda's post. "You guys working on wedding stuff?" His reply came hours later, Just going through some vendor options. Nothing major. Don't worry about anything here. Focus on your project. The next day, I received a text from Megan that made my stomach knot. Hey, is everything okay with you and Ryan? Amanda's been at your place a lot. Just checking. I called Megan during my lunch break, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anxiety building inside me. What do you mean Amanda's been there a lot? Ryan said she just dropped by once or twice. Megan hesitated. Well, I live 3 blocks from you, and I've seen her car there almost every evening this week. I thought maybe you asked her to help with something specific. No, I replied, feeling a cold weight settling in my chest. I didn't ask her to help with anything. I'm sure it's nothing, Megan backpedaled, clearly hearing the concern in my voice. Maybe they're planning a surprise for when you get back. I wanted to believe that explanation, but the sinking feeling persisted. That evening, my mother called to check on my London experience, and what she said only heightened my suspicions. Amanda and Ryan seem to be getting along so well lately, she commented cheerfully. She mentioned they're finalizing some wedding details together. It's nice to see you all acting like family already. What kind of details? I asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, I'm not sure of the specifics. Something about the venue and catering, I think. Amanda said not to bother you with it while you're working so hard. After the call, I immediately tried reaching Ryan. He didn't answer. I tried again an hour later, and he finally picked up, sounding slightly out of breath. Hey, sorry I missed your call. I was at the gym. Ryan, what's going on with Amanda? My mom said you two are making wedding decisions without me. It's nothing major, Jess. Just confirming some details with vendors. Amanda offered to help since she knows you're swamped with work. But why wouldn't you discuss these things with me first? And why is she at our apartment every night? Ryan's voice took on a defensive edge. She's not here every night. And I thought you'd appreciate the help. This promotion is important to you, right? I'm just trying to take some pressure off. Something in his tone didn't sit right, but I was exhausted from a 14-hour workday and couldn't summon the energy for a confrontation. Just please don't make any big decisions without me, okay? Of course not. Get some rest, you sound tired. The call ended without our usual I love you, a small detail that loomed large in my mind as I tried to sleep that night. My attempts to reach Amanda went straight to voicemail. I left a casual message asking how she was doing, hoping she might volunteer information about her sudden involvement in my wedding planning. She texted back hours later. Super busy this week. Let's catch up when you're back. Focusing on work like you should be. The dismissive tone and the obvious deflection only intensified my unease. As my London project entered its most critical phase, requiring almost round-the-clock attention, I found myself distracted by the growing certainty that something was very wrong at home. By the end of my first week in London, Ryan had stopped initiating calls, responding to my texts with increasingly brief replies. When we did speak, he seemed hurried and evasive. Once, I distinctly heard Amanda's laugh in the background before he quickly explained she had just stopped by to drop off dinner. My focus on the Kingsley project suffered as my mind constructed increasingly worrying scenarios. Yet each time I confronted my fears directly, logic would intervene. This was Ryan, the man I trusted completely, and Amanda, despite our complicated relationship, was my sister. Surely I was overreacting, letting distance and stress fuel paranoia. But as the second week of my London assignment began, even that rational voice couldn't explain away the growing evidence that something fundamental had shifted in my absence, something that threatened everything I thought was certain in my life. The Kingsley campaign launch was scheduled for Friday, which would mark the end of my 2-week London assignment. However, by Wednesday afternoon, we had miraculously finalized everything ahead of schedule. My team had worked incredibly efficiently, and the client was thrilled with our work. You've exceeded all our expectations, Jessica, Mr. Kingsley said during our final meeting. I've already called your boss to sing your praises. My supervisor back in Boston agreed I could return early. Take Thursday and Friday to travel home and rest, she insisted. You've earned it. I felt a surge of excitement at the thought of surprising Ryan. Perhaps my early return would clear up whatever strange dynamic had developed in my absence. I booked a flight for the following morning, texting Megan, and only Megan, about my early arrival. Don't tell Ryan, I wrote. I want to surprise him. Megan's response was strangely hesitant. Are you sure that's a good idea? Why wouldn't it be? I replied, my anxiety spiking. No reason. Just wondering if he might have planned something for your scheduled return date instead. Her explanation seemed reasonable enough, but it didn't fully dispel my concerns. Nevertheless, I boarded my flight the next morning, the 7-hour journey giving me plenty of time to imagine the joy of reuniting with Ryan and putting my worries to rest. My flight landed at Boston Logan International at 2:30 p.m. local time. I collected my luggage, caught a taxi, and headed straight to our apartment, my heart alternating between excitement and apprehension. When I unlocked the door to our home, I was met with an unusual silence. Ryan should have been at work, so that wasn't surprising, but something felt off. Walking through our living room, I noticed subtle changes. Furniture slightly rearranged, a throw pillow I didn't recognize, a wine glass in the sink with a distinct lipstick stain that wasn't my shade. Most disturbing was the scent lingering in the air, Amanda's distinctive perfume, the expensive French brand she always made sure everyone knew about. It wasn't just a trace suggesting a brief visit, it permeated the space as if she'd been there for hours, perhaps overnight. I went to our bedroom, finding the bed made differently than how Ryan and I typically arranged it. Opening the closet to hang up my coat, I froze. The garment bag containing my wedding dress, which should have been hanging prominently in the center, was gone. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and saw several unread messages that had arrived during my flight. From my cousin Ellie, is everything okay with you and Ryan? Just saw something confusing. From my college friend Taylor, call me ASAP. Something weird is happening. And most alarmingly, a photo from Ellie showing Amanda wearing what appeared to be MY wedding dress, standing beside Ryan at what looked exactly like the venue we had booked. The timestamp showed the photo was taken just an hour ago. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. There had to be some explanation. Maybe it was a weird rehearsal? A photo shoot for something? But deep down I knew. I called Ellie with shaking hands. Jessica. Oh my God, she answered immediately. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm home. What's happening? Why is Amanda in my dress at my venue? There was a long pause. You don't know? Jessica, they're getting married. Today. Right now. Everyone thought you knew, that you'd called off the engagement and Amanda was taking your place. That's what they told everyone. The world tilted beneath me. Without responding, I ended the call, grabbed my car keys, and raced downstairs. I drove to the waterfront venue in a state of shock, running multiple red lights along the way. The valet attendant recognized me as I screeched to a halt outside the venue. Ms. Wright, I thought you were inside already. Your sister looks just like you in that dress. I pushed past him, rushing through the doors and following the sound of reception music. What I saw stopped me cold, my planned wedding in full swing, but with Amanda as the bride. My carefully selected flowers decorated every table. My chosen band played our first dance song. My hand-picked menu was being served to my invited guests. And there in the center of it all, Amanda and Ryan danced together, her head on his shoulder, wearing my dress altered slightly to fit her frame. The sight was so surreal that for a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating. People noticed me standing there in my travel clothes, shock evident on my face. Conversations halted. The music played on, but the atmosphere shifted as heads turned toward me. Amanda saw me first. Instead of shame or guilt, her expression showed only momentary surprise before settling into something worse, smugness. She whispered something to Ryan, who turned to look at me, his face paling. I walked toward them, the crowd parting silently around me. What is this? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Amanda's grip tightened on Ryan's arm possessively. Exactly what it looks like, Jess. Life goes on. Plans change. These are MY plans. My venue. My dress. My fiancé. Each word felt like glass in my throat. We're yours, she corrected, her smile never wavering. Ryan and I realized we were meant to be together while you were gone. We didn't want to waste all these excellent arrangements. I looked at Ryan, waiting for him to contradict her, to say this was some elaborate, cruel joke. He met my gaze briefly before looking away. I'm sorry, Jessica, he mumbled, not sounding sorry at all. Things just happened. Things just happened? I repeated incredulously. In 2 weeks? You decided to marry my sister in MY planned wedding. By now, everyone was watching the unfolding drama. I spotted my parents standing nearby, their expressions a mix of shock and discomfort. They hadn't stopped this. They were participating. You should probably go, Amanda said, maintaining her composed facade. You're making a scene. But you can watch from the sidelines if you want. After all, you did plan a beautiful wedding. Something inside me shattered at those words. The callousness, the complete lack of remorse, it was beyond comprehension. I noticed my mother finally moving toward me, but it was too late. I couldn't bear another second in that room, watching my sister live the life she'd stolen from me. I turned and ran, tears blinding me as I pushed through the doors and out into the parking lot. Behind me, I heard a few voices calling my name, but I didn't stop. I got into my car and drove, with no destination in mind, just needing to put distance between myself and the horrifying scene I'd just witnessed. My entire life had just imploded, and I hadn't even seen it coming. I checked into the first hotel I came across, a mid-range chain off the highway. The front desk clerk glanced at my tear-stained face, but professionally avoided comment as I paid for the room with shaking hands. Once inside, I collapsed onto the bed, finally allowing the full impact of what had happened to crash over me. My phone had been buzzing continuously since I fled the wedding venue. I forced myself to look at the screen, 23 missed calls and dozens of texts. Some were from concerned friends who had witnessed the confrontation. Others were from family members, including 3 from my mother. None were from Ryan or Amanda. One text from Megan stood out. I'm so sorry, Jess. I suspected something but had no proof. Tell me where you are. You shouldn't be alone right now. I hesitated before responding with my location. Within 40 minutes, there was a knock at my door. Megan stood there holding a bag from the liquor store and another containing ice cream. I didn't know which would help more, she said softly, so I brought both. We sat on the hotel bed, passing a pint of chocolate ice cream between us as I tried to make sense of what had happened. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. I said, my voice hollow, that there had to be an explanation for why they were spending so much time together. Megan's expression was pained. I started noticing things about 2 or 3 days after you left. Amanda's car at your place at odd hours, them together at restaurants. But it seemed so outlandish, the idea that your sister and fiancé would. She trailed off. Did everyone know except me? The question that had been burning inside me. No, Megan said firmly. Most people at the wedding today seemed confused. The story they told was that you had called things off with Ryan because of some job opportunity in London, and that you had given them your blessing to use the venue and arrangements since everything was already paid for. The calculated nature of their deception made me physically ill. And my parents? They were there. They didn't stop it. Megan hesitated. From what I gathered, they were told this was what you wanted. That you and Amanda had worked things out between you. Your mom looked pretty shocked when you showed up. The following days passed in a blur of grief and logistics. I couldn't return to the apartment I'd shared with Ryan, not only because I couldn't bear to be there, but because legally it was his name on the lease. I extended my hotel stay while looking for a new place to live. The Monday after the wedding, my phone rang with a call from my mother. After 3 days of silence, I finally answered. Jessica, Please come home. We need to talk about this. Talk about what, Mom? How you watched Amanda marry Ryan without even calling to check if your other daughter was okay with it. We thought you knew. Amanda showed us texts from you saying you were staying in London for a job and didn't want the wedding anymore. She said you told her she could have the venue since it was paid for. And you believe that? Without talking to me directly. My voice cracked. Did you even try to call me? The silence told me everything. They hadn't tried hard enough. They had accepted the convenient story that caused the least disruption. We're so sorry, Jessica. We had no idea. But sorry couldn't undo what had happened. Sorry couldn't erase the images burned into my mind. Amanda in my dress, Ryan holding her the way he used to hold me, my carefully planned wedding becoming the backdrop for their betrayal. A week after returning from London, I met with Megan for coffee. She had been collecting information from mutual friends, trying to piece together the timeline of Amanda and Ryan's deception. From what I can gather, it started about 3 months ago, she explained gently. Long before your London trip, Taylor saw them having lunch together at that cafe near Ryan's office. They claimed it was about planning your birthday surprise. 3 months? We were actively planning our wedding then. I was with him every day. How could he? There's more, Megan said hesitantly. Rebecca from your office said she saw them at the Harborview Hotel one night, going into an elevator together. Each new revelation was another knife to my heart. The betrayal wasn't just about the wedding day, it had been ongoing, deliberate, planned. While I was excitedly planning our future, Ryan had been building a different one with my sister. I learned they had systematically used all my wedding deposits and arrangements. They had contacted my vendors, using Amanda's access to my wedding planning email, which I had shared with her months earlier when she'd offered to help with minor tasks. They had sent updated invitations to guests, explaining the change in bride, with their fabricated story about my sudden career move to London. The promotion I had been so excited about, the one Ryan had so enthusiastically encouraged me to pursue, now seemed like convenient timing they had exploited. Despite the success of the Kingsley campaign, I took a leave of absence from work. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't bring myself to care about marketing strategies and brand positioning when my personal life had been so thoroughly destroyed. I found a small studio apartment across town and furnished it sparsely with essentials. Each night, I would lie awake replaying moments from my relationship with Ryan, searching for signs I had missed, red flags I had ignored. Each memory was now tainted, suspect. Had he ever truly loved me? Or had I just been a placeholder until someone better came along? The worst part was the isolation. Many mutual friends felt caught in the middle and kept their distance. Some believed the lies Ryan and Amanda had told. Others simply didn't know what to say in the face of such a betrayal. My parents tried repeatedly to reach out, but I maintained minimal contact. Their failure to verify such an outlandish story before participating in that wedding felt like its own betrayal. 1 month after the wedding, I hit my lowest point. I had lost weight, wasn't sleeping, and could barely function. My new apartment still had unpacked boxes scattered about, as if setting up a real home would somehow make this new reality permanent. That evening, sitting on my bare mattress with no energy even to cry anymore, I wondered if I would ever recover from this. Everything I had believed about my life, my future, my relationships, had been proven false. The career success I had achieved in London felt meaningless compared to the personal devastation I was experiencing. I had trusted completely and been betrayed absolutely. And I had no idea how to move forward from that. Exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after what I now referred to as the incident, an unexpected envelope arrived at my new apartment. The return address belonged to David Cooper, Ryan's former roommate from his early days at the investment firm. We had met a few times at company events, but I wouldn't have called us friends. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note and a USB drive. Jessica, I've been trying to find you since I heard what happened. What Ryan and your sister did was unforgivable, but there's more you should know. I've been collecting these over the past 6 months because something fell off. I'm sorry I didn't show you sooner. David. With shaking hands, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained hundreds of screenshots, text messages between Ryan and Amanda dating back almost a year, emails they had exchanged, photos of them together at times when Ryan had told me he was working late or on business trips. Their affair had started long before my London assignment, almost 3 months after our engagement. But as shocking as that revelation was, it wasn't the most disturbing information on the drive. Among the screenshots were email exchanges between Ryan and someone named Marcus at his firm, discussing ways to adjust client accounts and reallocate funds. There were spreadsheets showing unusual transfers, bank statements with highlighted transactions, and notes about covering tracks. Ryan had been embezzling from his company. Further digging revealed evidence of massive gambling debts Ryan had accumulated: online poker, sports betting, casino losses. He had been using the embezzled money to cover these debts while maintaining our lifestyle. Several text exchanges between Ryan and Amanda explicitly discussed my excellent credit score and how Ryan planned to use it to secure loans once we were married. There were also references to the inheritance I had received after my grandmother passed away the previous year, money I had placed in a separate account for our future children's education. Once we're married, I'll have access to her accounts. We can solve both our problems, Ryan had written to Amanda. But what about after the wedding? Won't she notice money missing? Amanda had replied, not if we're careful. Besides, with her workload, she barely checks her statements. We just need to get through the wedding first. As I read through more messages, the nature of their relationship became clearer. Ryan had initially approached Amanda as an accomplice, using her jealousy of me as leverage to gain her help in accessing my finances. But somewhere along the line, their conspiracy had evolved into an affair. Another screenshot showed Amanda writing, "What if we didn't have to hide? What if I didn't have to be the secret side piece anymore?" Ryan's reply, "You know, I can't leave her yet. Not until I have access to the inheritance." The timing of my London trip had presented them with an unexpected opportunity to accelerate their plan. With me out of the country and focused on work, they had seized the chance to take everything, not just my fiancé, but my wedding, my dress, my carefully laid plans. I sat staring at my screen, emotions churning inside me. The pain of their betrayal was still acute, but now it was joined by something else: cold, clarifying anger. This hadn't just been a case of two people falling for each other behind my back. This had been calculated, predatory, aimed at exploiting me financially. My first instinct was to call the police immediately, to expose Ryan's fraud and Amanda's complicity, to watch their newly minted marriage crumble under the weight of criminal charges. But as the initial surge of rage subsided, I realized that rushing into action might not be the wisest move. I called Stephanie Miller, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in financial crimes. "This is extensive," she said after I forwarded her the files. "But I need to warn you, if you go to the authorities right now, things could get complicated. Ryan could claim these documents were obtained illegally. He could delete evidence, cover his tracks. So what do I do?" I asked, frustration evident in my voice. "If you want justice, real justice, you need more. More evidence, more documentation. This is a good start, but you need an airtight case." She paused. "And Jessica? Be careful. People who commit financial fraud and manipulate others this way, they're dangerous when cornered." That night, I couldn't sleep. But unlike the insomnia of previous weeks, which had been marked by anguish and grief, this sleeplessness had purpose. I was formulating a plan. The next morning, I contacted David Cooper, thanking him for the information and asking if we could meet. Over coffee at a quiet cafe far from our usual haunts, he filled in more details. I noticed discrepancies in some accounts I was helping Ryan with about 6 months ago, David explained. When I questioned him, he brushed it off as administrative errors. But then I saw the same pattern repeating. Around the same time, he started mentioning your sister a lot. Why didn't you say anything? I couldn't keep the accusation from my voice. David looked down, ashamed. I was gathering proof. Going to management with half-baked suspicions against a rising star like Ryan would have ended my career, not his. By the time I had enough evidence to be confident, you were in London and they were. He trailed off. Getting married in my wedding, I finished flatly. I'm sorry, Jessica. I should have found a way to warn you. Despite my initial anger, I could understand David's position. Corporate politics and self-preservation were powerful motivators. At least he had come forward now. That evening, I called Megan and shared everything I had learned. So it wasn't just about them falling for each other, she said, clearly disgusted. This was about money the whole time. And not just any money, my money. My inheritance, my credit, my financial stability. The realization made me feel physically ill. I thought I knew Ryan. I thought I knew my own sister. How could I have been so blind? You weren't blind, Jess. You were trusting. There's a difference. Megan's voice was gentle but firm. So, what are you going to do now? The question hung in the air between us. A week ago, I might have said nothing, might have chosen to withdraw, lick my wounds, and try to forget. But now, with this new knowledge, something had shifted inside me. I'm going to get justice, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Not revenge, justice. For myself and for everyone else they've hurt with their schemes. This secret, the evidence of their financial crimes, wasn't just painful knowledge. It was power. It was a path forward. It was the key to ensuring that what they had done to me wouldn't simply be brushed aside as romantic drama. For the first time since walking into that wedding reception, I felt something other than despair. I felt purpose. I felt control returning. And with it came the first faint stirring of something I had thought was lost forever, hope. My marketing career had taught me valuable lessons about strategy, messaging, and the power of perception. Now, I would apply those skills to the most important campaign of my life. The first step was establishing a facade. If Ryan and Amanda suspected I knew about their financial crimes, they would immediately cover their tracks. I needed them to believe I was merely a heartbroken ex, too devastated by their betrayal to pose any threat. It wasn't difficult to appear devastated. I was. But beneath the genuine grief, a plan was taking shape. I returned to work, explaining my absence as personal issues that were now being addressed. My boss, impressed by the success of the Kingsley campaign, welcomed me back warmly and offered me the international division position we had discussed before my London trip. Are you sure you're ready? She asked, concern evident in her expression. Word of my public humiliation had spread through office gossip. I need this, I replied honestly. I need to focus on something other than my personal life right now. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and, more importantly, a reason to appear too busy and preoccupied to pursue any questions about Ryan's financial activities. My next step was connecting with David more regularly. As Ryan's colleague, he had access to information I couldn't obtain directly. We established a secure communication system using encrypted messaging apps to share updates. Ryan's getting sloppy, David reported 2 weeks into our arrangement. He seemed stressed, taking more risks with the accounts. Keep documenting everything, I instructed. But don't draw attention to yourself. Meanwhile, I reached out to the security team at Ryan's firm through an anonymous tip line they maintained for whistleblowers. I provided just enough information to raise red flags without revealing everything we knew. This ensured the firm would begin its own quiet investigation, creating another layer of evidence collection independent from my efforts. I maintained minimal contact with my family, responding to texts with brief, non-committal messages that revealed nothing about my emotional state or my growing knowledge. When my mother persisted in trying to arrange a reconciliation, I finally agreed to a brief phone call. Amanda feels terrible about how everything happened, she claimed, though her tone lacked conviction. I'm sure she does, I replied neutrally, giving her nothing to report back. She and Ryan want to clear the air. Maybe we could all have dinner together when things are less raw. The suggestion was so absurd that I almost laughed. I don't think that will be possible, Mom. I'm focusing on my career right now. The London project led to a promotion. That's wonderful, Jessica. Her surprise was evident. She had expected me to be falling apart, not advancing professionally. Yes, it is. I need to go now. Conference call with our European office. These brief, controlled interactions served their purpose. Through my parents, Amanda and Ryan would hear that I was withdrawing, focusing on work, showing no signs of suspicion about their deeper schemes. 3 months after the incident, I received my first direct contact from Amanda. A text message, deceptively casual. Hey Jess, I know things are weird between us, but I've been thinking about you. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime? Just to talk. I waited a full day before responding. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Her reply came quickly. I understand. Just know I'm here when you are ready. The fake concern made my stomach turn, but I recognized it for what it was, not remorse, but reconnaissance. She wanted to gauge my state of mind, to ensure I remained the wounded victim rather than a potential threat. A week later, Ryan reached out via email. Jessica, I hope this finds you well. There are some financial documents I need that may still be in your possession. Tax forms from last year and some investment statements. Could you check if you have these? It would help us both with the untangling process. The email confirmed what David had already told me. Ryan was trying to cover his tracks, looking for documents that might reveal his schemes. I responded briefly. I'll look through my files this weekend. This began a careful dance. I would find some of the requested documents, the innocuous ones, and take my time delivering them. Each interaction was an opportunity to present the image of someone slowly recovering, still hurt but beginning to move on, and most importantly, completely unaware of any financial impropriety. Meanwhile, the evidence against them continued to mount. David provided screenshots of increasingly panicked messages between Ryan and various bookkeepers at the firm. The security team's investigation, though still quiet, was progressing. I could tell from the specific types of documentation requests coming through official channels. Most revealing were the signs of trouble in the newlyweds' relationship. David reported overhearing arguments. Amanda began posting cryptic social media messages about trust and honesty, ironic, given her actions, but telling nonetheless. For months after their wedding, Megan spotted them having a heated argument at a restaurant. Amanda looked furious, she reported. I couldn't hear everything, but she definitely said something about money going missing. Ryan kept trying to quiet her down. The honeymoon period had ended quickly. As Ryan's financial schemes became more desperate, he was clearly dipping into funds Amanda thought were earmarked for their future. Through mutual friends, I learned they had postponed their planned honeymoon to the Maldives due to unexpected expenses. Ryan had also been passed over for a promotion he had been confident about receiving. The noose was tightening, but I remained patient, continuing to build my case methodically. I focused equally on rebuilding my life. The international division role challenged me professionally, demanding long hours that helped keep my mind occupied. I moved from my temporary studio to a proper one-bedroom apartment in a new neighborhood, deliberately choosing a building with excellent security. I started therapy, finding genuine healing in processing not just the betrayal, but the patterns in my relationship with Amanda that had led to this point. I joined a kickboxing class, finding unexpected satisfaction in the physical release it provided. 6 months after the incident, I received another text from Amanda. This one lacked the false warmth of her previous message. We need to talk about some financial matters involving Ryan's investments. It's important. I recognized the urgency behind her words. Things were unraveling for them, and she was looking for someone to blame or perhaps a way out. I replied simply, I'm traveling for work this week. Perhaps next week. The delay was strategic. According to David, The firm's internal investigation was nearing completion, and they were preparing to involve external authorities. 7 months after returning from London to find my life stolen, I met with the head of security at Ryan's firm, alongside representatives from their legal department and a detective from the Financial Crimes Division of the Boston Police Department. I brought Stephanie with me as my legal counsel. "We've been building this case for months," the security director explained. "But your documentation fills in crucial gaps. May I ask why you waited to come forward with this information?" Stephanie answered for me. "My client needed to ensure her own safety and security before exposing such significant crimes. Given the personal relationship involved, there were complex considerations." The detective nodded sympathetically. "We understand, Ms. Wright. Unfortunately, we see this pattern often, financial crimes intertwined with personal relationships." I provided my official statement, turning over all the evidence we had accumulated. The timeline I had constructed showed clearly how Ryan had embezzled approximately $1.2 million over 2 years, using various accounts to hide the money trail. The evidence also demonstrated Amanda's knowledge of and participation in the scheme, particularly in the latter months, when she had actively helped Ryan access my personal financial information. As I left the meeting, the detective assured me, "We'll handle this discreetly until we're ready to make arrests. Your safety is a priority." For the first time in months, I felt a weight lifting. Justice was in motion, no longer just a distant hope, but an approaching reality. 2 days later, I received a desperate call from Amanda. "Jessica, I need to see you." "Now." "It's an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" I kept my voice neutral. "I can't discuss it over the phone. Please, just meet me. For coffee. In public." I agreed to meet at a cafe near my office, a busy place where I felt safe. When Amanda arrived, the transformation in her appearance shocked me. Her typically immaculate presentation was disheveled, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Ryan's been lying to me," she blurted before even sitting down fully. "About everything. The money, his job, all of it." I maintained my carefully constructed facade. "What are you talking about?" "He's in trouble, Jess. Big trouble. And I think he's been using me. Using us both." Her voice cracked, her eyes filling with tears that seemed remarkably genuine. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked coolly. "Because I don't know what to do. And because—" She hesitated. "Because I owe you an apology. What we did to you is unforgivable. I see that now. Too little, too late." Her remorse came not from genuine regret for hurting me, but from the realization that she had been conned by the same man she had helped con me. "What exactly is Ryan in trouble for?" I asked, pretending ignorance. Amanda leaned forward, lowering her voice. "He's been taking money from his clients, gambling it away, using company funds, and now it's all falling apart. There's an investigation. He's talking about leaving the country." I raised my eyebrows in feigned surprise. "That sounds serious." "It is. And I think I might be implicated too." Her voice trembled. "I didn't know at first, I swear. But then I did know, and I still went along with it, and now." She broke down crying. I watched her, feeling nothing but a cold clarity. This was the moment I had been working toward, Amanda revealing her own guilt, coming to me not out of sisterly love, but desperate self-preservation. "What do you want from me, Amanda?" I asked directly. She looked up, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. "Help me, please. You always know what to do in a crisis. You're smarter than both of us. There must be a way out of this." "There is," I said, my voice steady. "The truth." Her face fell. "What do you mean?" "I mean confessing, taking responsibility, facing the consequences." "I can't go to prison," she whispered, horrified. "That might not be in your control anymore." As I spoke those words, I noticed movement at the cafe entrance. The detective I had met with earlier entered, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. They spotted us immediately. Amanda, following my gaze, turned and saw them approaching. Her face drained of color as understanding dawned. "You knew," she whispered, turning back to me. "You've known all along." I met her eyes steadily. "Yes, I've known for months. About everything. The affair, the fraud, the plans to use my inheritance and credit. You set me up. This meeting was your idea," I reminded her. "I just didn't discourage it." The officers reached our table. "Amanda Wright," the detective said formally. "We need you to come with us for questioning regarding an ongoing financial crimes investigation." As they led my sister away, she looked back at me one last time, her expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and something else, perhaps a glimmer of respect for the sister she had always underestimated. I remained seated, watching through the window as they placed her in the police car. Another car pulled up, and I saw Ryan being similarly escorted from his office building across the street. The carefully orchestrated trap had closed perfectly. My secret, the knowledge I had been gathering while they thought I was merely nursing my wounds, had indeed changed everything. The arrest of Ryan Bennett and Amanda Wright made headlines in Boston's financial district. Investment manager and accomplice charged in million-dollar fraud scheme, read the Boston Globe. The articles mentioned the personal connection, that Amanda was the sister of Ryan's former fiancé, but focused primarily on the financial crimes, sparing me the worst of the public spectacle. Ryan was held without bail due to flight risk concerns. Amanda, facing lesser charges but still serious ones, managed to post bail after 3 days in custody. My parents, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened, were devastated. "We had no idea," my father said when he called me after Amanda's arraignment. "Jessica, if we had known any of this." "But you didn't ask," I replied, the months of hurt still evident in my voice. "You saw what you wanted to see." "You're right," he admitted, his voice breaking. "We failed you. Completely." That acknowledgement meant more than I had expected. It didn't erase the pain of their choices, but it opened a door that I had thought permanently closed. 2 weeks after the arrests, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Jessica?" It was Amanda, her voice small and unfamiliar. "Please don't hang up." I remained silent, waiting. "I'm calling because I need to say this directly, not through lawyers or mom and dad." She took a shaky breath. "I'm guilty. Of everything. The affair, the wedding, the fraud. All of it." "I know," I replied simply. "I've accepted a plea deal. I'm going to testify against Ryan. About all of it. How he approached me initially about helping him access your finances, how it evolved into us." She paused. "I'm going to serve time, Jessica. Not as much as Ryan will, but enough." I hadn't expected this level of accountability from her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to know I'm not fighting it. I'm not making excuses. What we did to you, was unforgivable. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I finally understand what I've done." The conversation was brief, but it marked a turning point. Not in our relationship. That would require years of work and might never fully recover, but in my own healing process. Hearing Amanda take responsibility without deflection or justification allowed me to begin releasing some of the anger I had carried. Ryan, in contrast, maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. He claimed Amanda had masterminded everything, using her access to my personal information to facilitate the fraud without his knowledge. It was a desperate, transparent lie that fell apart under scrutiny. The financial records clearly showed his activities predated his involvement with Amanda. 6 months after their arrests, I testified at Ryan's trial. Walking into that courtroom, feeling his eyes on me as I took the stand, was one of the hardest things I had ever done. But I spoke clearly and confidently, detailing the relationship timeline, the London trip, and the discovery of their scheme. Ms. Wright, Ryan's defense attorney asked during cross-examination, "Isn't it possible that your testimony is colored by personal resentment over your fiancé leaving you for your sister?" I met his gaze steadily. "My testimony is based on documented evidence, not emotion. The financial records, text messages, and emails speak for themselves. My personal feelings about their relationship are irrelevant to the fact that Mr. Bennett stole over $1 million from his clients and attempted to access my inheritance fraudulently." The jury found Ryan guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Amanda, through her plea agreement, received 18 months in a minimum security facility, plus 5 years of probation and restitution payments. After the sentencing, my mother reached out again, asking if we could meet. We arranged to have lunch at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant halfway between my apartment and their home. "We've been seeing a family therapist," she told me as we awkwardly navigated our first face-to-face conversation in nearly a year. Trying to understand how we could have been so blind about Amanda. About everything. And I prompted when she fell silent. "And we've realized we've been enabling her behavior her entire life. Making excuses. Accepting her version of events without question." She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand, but extending the gesture. "We failed you, Jessica. Not just with the wedding, but for years before that. We're trying to do better." It wasn't an instant reconciliation. The damage was too deep for that. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of the truth and a commitment to change. We agreed to move forward slowly, with clear boundaries and expectations. As for me, the professional success that had begun with the London project continued to flourish. My international division was expanding, and I was traveling regularly to European capitals, building a reputation as a marketing strategist who could navigate cross-cultural challenges effortlessly. During a conference in Chicago, I met Michael Donovan, an architect specializing in sustainable urban development. Our conversation started professionally. His firm was considering rebranding, but quickly evolved into something more personal. His intelligence and quiet confidence attracted me, but what struck me most was his transparency. After dinner, when he suggested seeing each other again, he handed me his card. "Look me up," he said with a gentle smile. "Check my references. I have nothing to hide." The gesture, understanding my caution after everything I'd been through, meant more than elaborate promises or romantic gestures could have. Our relationship developed slowly and deliberately. I was guarded at first, watching for red flags, analyzing his words and actions for inconsistencies. But Michael was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. 6 months into dating, when he suggested meeting his parents during their visit to Boston, I realized I was finally ready to trust again, not blindly, but thoughtfully. A year after Ryan's sentencing, Amanda was released from prison. She moved in with our parents temporarily, enrolled in community college courses, and began her mandated community service. We exchanged occasional texts, surface-level communication that acknowledged our shared history without pretending the wounds had healed. "I'm working on myself," she wrote in one message. Really working, not just saying it. "I'm glad," I replied, and meant it. Her path to redemption would be long and difficult, but I no longer needed to stand in her way or have her in mine. The inheritance that Ryan had targeted remained safely invested, growing steadily for the future. The wedding deposits I had lost were eventually recovered through the legal proceedings, though I donated the money to a nonprofit supporting victims of financial crimes. 2 years after the incident, I stood once again at the lighthouse where Ryan had proposed, this time alone by choice. I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed since that earlier visit. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me. The pain had been real and devastating. But in confronting it, in refusing to remain a passive victim, I had discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Strategic thinking, resilience, The courage to stand up for justice, even when it meant confronting those closest to me. I had lost a fiancé who had never truly loved me and a sister who had been consumed by jealousy and resentment. But I had gained something more valuable, self-knowledge and the unshakable certainty that I could survive whatever life threw at me. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, I turned away from the lighthouse and walked back to my car, where Michael waited patiently. We had dinner reservations at a new restaurant in town and plans to browse apartment listings afterward, considering the possibility of moving in together. Life hadn't turned out as I had once planned. It had turned out better, more authentic, more honest, built on a foundation of hard-won wisdom rather than fairy tale expectations. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted opens the door to what you truly need. Sometimes betrayal, painful as it is, reveals truths that blind trust would never uncover. And sometimes, the most powerful secret you can possess is the knowledge of your own strength. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced betrayal or had to rebuild your life after everything fell apart, I'd love to hear about your journey in the comments. How did you find the strength to move forward? What lessons did you learn along the way? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, your worst moments don't define you. How you respond to them does.